back, everyone, to the Shock Absorber podcast, and it is, as always, wonderful to have you along with us, and we've got some wonderful people along with us, as usual. First of all, regular co-host Stu, too busy texting someone?
I am, true.
Okay, text me with an emergency, I don't want to do this.
And I'm done.
Okay. Welcome.
Thank you.
Feeling good today?
Yeah, I am.
Excellent. And I think this is the first time you've ever been on a Shock Absorber. Fee.
It is.
Welcome.
Hi.
You just finished recording a Chip Lunch podcast with us. That was your part 2, and we're going to have to do a part 3, which is great. But welcome to the Shock Absorber. It's lovely to have you along with us.
Thanks for having me.
That's all right. Fee is extremely learned and extremely experienced in ministry, so it's always good to have you along on the podcast as well.
Because today is the International Day of Compliments, which you may or may not be aware of.
I was not aware of
I'm going to compliment Fee by saying I think she's the best youth minister in Sydney.
Wow.
I kid you not.
High praise, and could very much be true.
It's my position.
Okay. I'll...
How many other best youth ministers are there?
Just you. There's lots of good youth ministers that I probably don't even know, but you're the best one I know.
Is there an awards ceremony for youth ministers?
We could have an award ceremony. We could do it live on the podcast.
Oh, wow. Well, there'd only be one.
Give Fee a hat and a cloak and stuff, and she could throw the hat in the air and stuff.
Oh, and a ring of power.
Like a
No, I was thinking like the flat cap thing.
When you
like
said
a
cloak,
university.
I was thinking Lord of the Rings.
Oh, Lord of the Rings, yeah.
Because you were trying to get us to get those fellowship rings for a while,
We
and we're like,
did.
we'd feel like a cult.
Oh, wow. That's true. I have to speak to that. I have to defend myself. In my defense, I thought it'd be cool because Christian Surfers had bracelets as part of Christian Surfers. And I thought, I'd be sick. We've got this Berean fellowship, which is for pastors, based on Berea, which is from Acts 17. And Acts 17 says that the Bereans had good character, they used the scriptures well, and they were convicted that Jesus is Lord. So I thought, how sick would it be to get like Berean rings? And then, because it was at the time of Lord of the Rings, there was quite a few jokes going around about the fellowship of the ring. And then I thought, okay, that's a bit daggy. So I think it was a bit nerdy, so we didn't do it. But one day maybe we will.
It was cool. It was just, we were looking for the shadows.
Yes,
We're always got to be aware of the shadows.
Yes.
Doing well. You're hitting all the touch points already, Fee, on the Shock Absorber podcast.
She's off and running.
Speaking of Berea...
By the way, just for our viewers and listeners, Fiona and I worked for 20 years in youth ministry, 20 plus years.
I don't know how many years.
A long
Would have
time
been probably
anyway.
20 years, because I was teaching scripture for 15 and I was doing youth ministry for longer than that. So, 20 will do.
So that's why we're regressing into the early 2000s as we start. Yeah, sorry, Joel. Go ahead.
That's fine. That was great.
Yeah, sick.
We mentioned the Berean Fellowship and Berea, and we like to call our internal training community.
Yeah, Berea community.
Berea community. And you guys actually were doing that. One of the subjects was Story of Soul Revival, which I think... very aptly you were teaching that because you've been there since the very beginning, Stu. But Fee mentioned, you were there, Fee, as well, but you mentioned that there was a really cool analogy that Stu did with the Breakfast Club. And now that's a movie that we've brought on before, but I thought as a cultural artefact, there's a different angle to it. So do you want to tell us the story of what Stu was talking about, and then we can leave off from there? Yeah.
So we, Stu, for the sake of the room at the time, we were surprised by how many people had actually seen the Breaking Club, weren't we? You were pleasantly surprised. I remember
it's an old movie now, isn't it?
Yeah, we showed it at late night once, so that's where some of those people would have seen it. I was probably partially responsible for promoting that. Possibly. Also Ferris Bueller. But that's, so Breakfast Club, Stu showed an old promo for it, and there's a point that it hits in that later on in the movie between, do you want me to explain the characters or?
Oh, slightly, yeah.
Yeah. So 2 female characters. Molly Ringwald is the princess, the popular one, and then Ali Sheedy is just, like the recluse basically. And they've never spoken to each other, and through the events of the movie, by the end, there's a scene where Molly is doing, I should remember their names, Claire is her name, and what's Ali Sheedy's name?
Claire and, I don't remember either. I
remember.
always think of them as
I'll just call them Molly and Ali.
Ali, yeah.
So Molly is doing Ali's makeup, and so she normally does the big black eyes because she's doing the whole sort of emo-y, gothy sort of
Like
look.
Cure fan.
Yeah,
sort
like
of
a
thing.
Cure fan sort of
I
thing.
thought
That's
she
what
looked
looks
cool
like.
before she put the makeup on.
Well, yes, I don't like the makeup that Molly does on her either, which is hilarious because it's very, very sweet and natural
Yeah,
and very,
yeah.
very American preppy, what I would
Yeah,
imagine that
yeah, it
would
was.
be, which was Molly's look. And she's doing her makeup, and Ali says to her, "Why are you being so nice to me?" And Molly gets this sort of sheepish almost look on her face, and she's like, "'Cause you're letting me?"
It's
And
cool.
Stu played that and then spoke to that in terms of Berea, and we were exploring how that relationship works in a Christian context and a church context, and particularly in a youth ministry context, and what that has to say about our long-term relationships in Soul Revival as well.
Do you have a particular motivation for doing that, Stu?
Yeah, no, we were talking about Bonhoeffer's views of friendship, where he talks about circles of friendship being, you can have a few really, really good friends, and then you can have a little bit of a broader circle of friends that you're still real good friends with, and then an even broader circle again. You can actually open yourself up to a lot of people as friends. You might not be as close as your 3 or 4 close friends, but he's kind of exploring how do you use your close friendships to be outward looking rather than inward looking.
Yeah, I love that.
And he wrote that stuff when he was in prison, when he was segregated from his friendship. Up until that point, he used a lot of family language. Obviously, the New Testament talks a lot about family as an ecclesial category, but then later in his life, he was also exploring friendship. And another German theologian had been looking into that a bit too, Moltmann, so he riffed off that. But what I thought was really cool about it is the New Testament, the Gospels aren't prescriptive, so we don't expect that everything that happens in the Gospels happens now.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Jesus walking on water was quite a unique occurrence. Not saying that if God wanted one of us to do that, it could happen, but we don't expect all the things to happen in the New Testament to always be happening at the same degree or whatever. But one of the things you do see from the Gospels is Jesus has 3 really good friends, Peter, James and John, and then he has 12 friends around him. He calls them friends. He says in John 13:13, he says, "I no longer call you my servants, I call you my friends if you do what I say," which is love one another. So he had 3 really close friends, 12 disciples who were his friends. But then we think there's about 72 people in his extended friendship group, and then probably about 120 around that as well. And that gets me thinking, that's kind of almost like this moving church service that's moving around. Like a lot of our churches are around 120 plus in the Anglican world. I mean, I know bigger churches have huge voluminous services with 1,000 people, but in a church service where there's about 120 to about 200, you can be friends with those people. But when we talk about it, often people hear, well, I couldn't be friends with that many people. And I think sometimes we think when we hear the word friend, we have to be best friends with everybody, but you can actually have a few close friends that you can bounce off to help the bigger group of friends and help the medium-sized group of friends and then the larger group. So I'm sort of thinking, I'll look at a church service, if most of the people have 2 or 3 friends and most of them have 12 friends, then how do those groups of 12 kind of contribute to being a core group in the church of, say, 72? And then how does that core group lead people who aren't quite regular yet? So you might have 120 irregulars in the church. Sorry, in 120 people, you may have 75 regulars and you might have people who come every now and again. But even the people who come every now and again, we tend to see them as pleasant strangers rather than real friends. So we're trying to describe and explore what it would look like if we saw each other as friends. So that's how we talked about it. And the phrase, "Why are you being so nice to me? It's because you let me." I think there is something for us to explore in the Western church, that whether we do actually let people into our lives as Christians. So it's not just me wanting to be friends with someone. It's also, will that person let me as well? So we just explored that for a bit. Yeah.
What was your... you said you enjoyed it, Fee. But what's your initial reaction to that? Saying that, is this something, a way of explaining it that I've been looking for? Or was it more like, I understand that that's what we've been trying to do at Soul Revival for a long time?
it was both those things, because I think it was very helpful. Stu was telling us to be the Ali Sheedy and let Molly in, but it also hit me quite strongly. And I was saying in the chip lunch, poor Stu, he was trying to do Berea, and I'm sitting in the front row and I'm getting all crying. And I'm like,
you were tearing up. I was like, oh, I've upset you.
I know. And I'm like, I don't want to distract you. I feel really bad. But it wasn't.
You had that kind of semi-smile on your face.
Yeah,
as well,
I was.
so I thought you were okay.
I was so
I thought
like
the happy tears. I thought.
Yeah. And they were emotional tears, because I was like, I look around this room and the people, like, there's new friends here that I've made, but there's long-term friends here, and I'm friends with them because they let me.
Yeah.
So I was Molly.
Yeah, true.
And that was not the point you were making, which is why I was like, oh, that's a real distraction in a sense. but that was what really hit me on an emotional level. So the stuff that you were saying about open yourself up, that is something that I think, yes, Soul Revival has been that. But maybe not for everyone. Maybe. I don't know. I haven't thought about it from a wider point of view yet. But for me, I thought, yeah, those friendships. Like, I mean, I was sitting next to Greaves. You know, Joel and Greaves were my scripture boys. I taught them high school scripture when they were in year 7. Yeah. How and like, so I was thinking about Greaves at the time, but here I am with Joel. Like, I'm your friends because you let me.
Yeah, it's true.
Like, you could have gone, pee off, stupid old lady. You know, like, seriously. Like,
that's also
because those who are not familiar with that phrase, they could have said they didn't want to be Fee's friend.
But you also allowed us to be friends with you too.
Well,
true.
But there was no expectation. So that, but yeah, and you offer friendship, and it's not always going to be reciprocated, I suppose. So the long-term friendships I have at Soulies have got two beautiful things. We have Jesus in common, and there are people who've let me be nice to them.
Yeah, that's nice. That's true.
How cool is that?
It is true.
And also because I am older, like than a lot of people that are my friends, there is initially that. So I don't know if a younger person would say that they were the Molly. Like, Molly sort of is in the power position in that moment. And when you are older, you naturally are in the power position. Good. But so you have to acknowledge that, not take advantage of that or use that in any way. But you know, when I'm friends with the year 7, year 8 girls on a Friday night at youth, like, I have to recognise I am in a power position there. Yep. I can't take that away, but I can not use that to my own advantage, and I cannot impress that upon them, unless obviously it's a safety issue where I need to make a call. And there's obviously the importance of modelling to them, which comes sometimes from a top down, but modelling can go bottom up in terms of age as well. So
We've
so
been
those
talking
things
about that actually, the bottom up, top down.
Yeah. So those things are really valuable, but I suppose I just want to have that awareness, and like, if I'm your youth leader, you can see me as somebody who is there for a purpose. It's actually a really beautiful example of one of the young girls who comes along, who came out of a non-church background, was invited by a friend, and had experience with social workers in her life, and she came along and she was calling us the workers, and she'd say to one of the leaders, "Oh, what about the other workers?" And I said, "Oh, we don't call ourselves that here." Like, I wasn't upset with her, and I didn't get cranky. I just said, "Oh, that's not really a word that we use. We're not really workers. Nobody here is getting paid, not to do this anyway." So we just had a little bit of a talk about that, and she adjusted her language. Last week, have you got time for a quick story?
Yeah.
Last week.
Oh, I think so, have we?
Yeah.
Sorry.
There were a few things. It's 3 weeks into school. Those girls who find school hard are starting to get edgy on a Friday night because they've had a hard week. Also, there are, we, not by design, but I feel, and I'm yet to see the proof of this over the next few weeks, but we had a combined night with Miranda Cons 2 weeks ago. As a result, we were travelling down to Cronulla, so we didn't do our commitments group that we normally do after the gathering. And then the same thing happened on Friday night, because we needed to talk to the young crew about the situation with MCC and give them a chance to ask any questions about the upcoming decisions about how we do or don't partner together. So that stuff was important. And so for those two very good reasons, we didn't have commitments for 2 weeks in a row. But I think looking at
Yeah,
what happened
right.
with my girls, I actually think that is
They needed it.
a touch point for them. If nothing else, I was talking to the leaders afterwards when we were debriefing. I said, if nothing else, they sit down. They might not sit still, but they sit down for 10 to 15 minutes and we pray. And even though they talk over each other, they don't usually talk over prayer. So even from a purely emotional grounding point of view,
It's good.
I think that spiritually it's helpful for them as well. Some of them are more open to that than others at the moment. But we hadn't had that for 2 weeks. And like, it was hard. And this girl I was mentioning really peaked and got really angry at me.
Did
and
she?
had a big
On
go
Friday
at
night?
on Friday night
Yeah,
at a decision I'd made. And ended up, there was a few people who went home, but she was one of the ones who went home. Her dad rocked up to pick her up and I was still engaging with her at a relational level, which I think she was very surprised at. Like, I just want to understand what's going on here. Tell me why you're upset, you know. She gave him a great big hug, burst into tears and said, I'm sorry I was so mean to you.
To her dad?
To me.
Oh, to you. She gave you a hug.
No, she gave her dad a hug.
And
Was
said,
crying.
And said,
so
I'm
she didn't
sorry.
give me, but as
And then
she
said,
was
"I'm
like,
sorry,
she was
I was mean to
emotional, and
you."
then she turned around to me
Cool. Okay.
and said, I don't know why I was so
Yeah,
mean to
cool.
you.
Oh, that's cool.
Because I was
That's lovely.
engaging with her going, I need to understand what's wrong, what's upset. So there's a massive, and she was peeking at me and I was having to calm the situation. So there was that power imbalance. I was the older person, she was the younger person.
De-escalating.
But I was trying to de-escalate, yes. But also I had no expectation. My expectation was she was going to go home and we were going to have to potentially deal with that next week or she might not come back. Every time a kid who's not connected in with church family, has a bad night at youth, you never know if they're going to come back. Right. So there was that moment. But that happened at the end and I'm like, that's relational. That's because she saw, she was able to have that vulnerability in front of me. She got herself into a thing where she was confrontational to me, so she couldn't do it in the one-on-one. But once Dad was there and there was a safe space, she was able to have that emotional reaction, and then she was crying, saying, "I don't know why I was so mean to you." It was quite completely unexpected. But looking back at it, I'm like, yeah, okay. She was up to 99. There was an emotional thing going for her.
Yeah.
But that was because of the relational thing that was going on. And the reason that I am building a relationship with her is she's letting me be nice to her.
Yeah, it's cool. Because you can't force that, hey?
No.
And some teenagers just don't want to buy into it. That's true. And for those of you who are listening or watching, if you're not sure what commitments is, that's what we call our Bible studies on Friday night. So.
Well, it makes a lot of sense because, a huge impact on me when I was first coming to youth group and the Soulies and then eventually church was the way that people just accepted me and just allowed me to be me. But as a sense, they're allowing me to be nice to them. And I was like, oh, well, I can be nice to these people too, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I suppose my final question around this, Stu, is what does it look like? Fee has given us a really good example of that.
Yeah, it's awesome.
But what else do you think is an example of allowing people to be nice to them, particularly in a church context?
Yeah, I think it's complicated, but I think we've got a lot of transients in our churches. So sometimes I think people invest in people and then they go, or people go. And so there's a sense of, well, if I invest deeply in someone and they're going to go anyway, I might not let them in too much. There's probably lots of other reasons because they've had a bad experience or, personality, or they don't resonate with someone who's different. There's lots of stuff too. But I think there's a big culture of transience in our churches where we're just sort of like, going to church is like going to a petrol station. You can get your petrol anywhere, so you go where there's the best I don't know, what do you call it?
98 octane?
Food.
Oh,
Maybe.
the fuel.
Yeah, there you go. we're different, drive different cars, obviously. Combis don't care if there's not even any octane in it. But no, I mean like you might stop off because there's a Macca's attached to the servo.
Oh,
That's
right.
what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
So you look for the added extras of a church, and if it's not floating your boat, you might go somewhere else and see if it's any better. But it's just petrol everywhere you go. Like you get your fill of God wherever you go to church. But I think sometimes we forget the fact that God calls us into relationship with himself and into relationship with each other, and that we're meant to carry each other's burdens and bear one another and all that sort of stuff. And I think we've got a little way to go, I think, to explore being committed to each other as well as being committed to Jesus, I think. So if people aren't that committed to each other, then there's not really a framework for intimacy in that sense. I mean, we belong because what Jesus did on the cross, so all there is for us to do is to express that reality, but we can express it in lots of different ways, but also we can hold back a bit, I think, as Christians in the West. That's just my impression. And particularly, I won't say any more. I think that's kind of the general thought I've got.
Okay. Well, I thought we could move on a little bit, because that was really fun, though, to talk about that. And I wanted to see what you guys thought about something in regards to Taylor Swift has just finished a tour here in Australia, as you may well know. Your son Ethan went to the concert.
Yeah,
We even had people from our church fly down to Melbourne to see the concert down at the MCG. Yep.
Wow, that's heavy.
I think it was partly because they couldn't get tickets in Sydney.
Yeah,
so they
right.
got tickets in Melbourne and they went down because the MCG could hold a few more people. I think that's why. Right. And you probably would agree that she's probably the biggest artist in the world right now. But I think part of her success is the really...
Other than Billy Bragg.
Billy who?
Billy Bragg.
Who's that?
It was a joke.
I know.
I think Billy Bragg's great.
Okay, I don't even know who that is.
Google him. Do yourself a favour.
I usually do know that. I usually know who you refer to most of the time. Not this time. Yeah. Sorry.
It's all right.
He's
a solo artist. Just
next level obscure.
It is. He is obscure.
Okay. But
best song is Levi Stubbs' Tears. Great song.
Okay. We'll put that in the show notes. Thanks. But so part of her success, I think, is how broadly she appeals to a lot of people.
Yep.
From mums and their daughters, and now even their daughters.
Intergenerational, isn't it?
It's very intergenerational. And we've talked about we talked about even a lot about it last week, about how technology has changed culture and church, and especially from the 50s and 60s onwards. That's where it made a real impact. But we talked last week, like it's almost like a rite of passage to disconnect from your parents, and that's kind of flowed on to generations after that. But with that in mind, I was thinking, and Taylor Swift in mind, I was listening to a podcast, so this is called the Bill Simmons podcast, which is usually about American sport, but he gets a lot of other thinkers on sometimes. And there's a guy called Chuck Klosterman who was on a couple of days ago, and he spoke, he's actually written a book about the 90s, which we referred to before, but he thought that one of the reasons that Taylor Swift's appeal was so big is because she's possibly a return to the family culture of you sit around the wireless all together and listen together. Or perhaps you all go to the cinemas and you all go see the same thing. And as you've spoken about, there's a story, Stu, where you said you were going down to the beach and you were all listening on Walkmans, but you were all listening to different music.
Yeah.
So his hypothesis, and he doesn't know if it's true or not, but he's wondering, is Taylor Swift perhaps a return to that time of we all get together around something and be part of something together? And we talked about last week, re-energizing some of the traditions, like intergenerational ministry, meals together. Tim came up with that analogy of beef brisket church rather than microwave church, which was pretty fun.
Slow church.
So here's my slow
cool.
church. That's right. So here's my question, though. Sorry,
We all cooked.
this is a bit cool. Maybe I'm a bit cooked. Do you think he's onto something?
Yeah.
And does it move the conversation around church from, you've spoken before, from daggy to dangerous to desirable to delightful? What do you think?
I think that's a really interesting hypothesis because, indeed, parents would sit around with their teenage kids in the 50s and listen to Doris Day singing, and it's what one of our favourite bands, AC/DC, call the Schmaltz era. Schmaltzy.
Do they call it that?
I can't remember what song it's on. I think it's on Let There Be Rock.
Yeah, White Man had the schmaltz. Yep.
Yeah, White Man had the schmaltz. So that, and I think he's referring to the fact that African American music was really cool and groovy, and then all the white kids got into that during the rock and roll era.
Blues and rock and roll.
Yeah. So before they had that, it was schmaltzy music. So it was really safe. So parents would love safe artists. Like when you dig into some of their lifestyles, they've got far from safe lifestyles. Like Doris Day had a crazy lifestyle, but she came across as the girl next door, so she was very safe. Lots of movies, teeny bopper kind of stuff. And I think in that regard, I don't know, I'll have to see what Fee thinks, but I'm a bit too far arm's length from her lyrics and her songs, but she certainly looks to me from a distance like she's a safe artist for a mother to take their daughter to.
I think so, yeah.
And then I think on top of that, the other thing, Ruth Le Cabrera has been saying she thinks that in some ways the generation gap is not there anymore. And I still think there is a generation gap, but I think she's right in many ways, because you've got things like parents wanting to get into movements that the kids are into and vice versa. So I think a whole heap of progressive people are really doing that together across generations. So I think there's people who really support the same-sex marriage debate. That was something that brought together young and old people. I think there was a lot of young people that were becoming more progressive during the teens, and I think their parents were moving with that vibe as well. Often, I think you also get in in the Shire here. I don't know what it's like the rest of Sydney, but definitely more parents buying alcohol for their children's parties and letting the children get drunk at their house, saying, "Well, at least they're getting drunk at my house rather than somewhere else." I'm hearing stories of that. I don't know people who do that, but I think there's a desire. Well, there's a lot of talk about Gen Xers and later baby boomers wanting to be friends with their kids rather than being their parents. So I look at a lot of the photos on Facebook of mums and their daughters at the concert. It's almost like the mums get to relive their youth. They get to enjoy their kids' youth, and they sort of together are hoping to bond when sometimes maybe they don't get on real good, but this is something they can put a friendship bracelet on and dress up and have a great memory. So I don't know what you think about that, Fee.
Just a point off that. So my sister and my nieces went on Monday night to Taylor Swift, and I've been hassling them all week. I want to see photos, because there was a big deal about the girls getting dressed up, and it's a really lovely way of engaging with them. It's something that I'm not generally, I'm not a Taylor Swift fan, so I'm not generally engaged with them, but I can engage at that level, and they were very excited about it. So there's photos, they show you the photos. So they went with a good friend of Meg's that she's been friends with since high school, and her daughters as well. So there was the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then Phil was there. I actually don't know. I don't think her friend's husband was there. I didn't see him in any of the photos. I didn't ask. But they all went together. Meg, my sister, was wearing the same dress as her friend's oldest daughter.
Yeah, okay.
Not by design. They knew it was similar, but when there was a photo of them, I'm like, are you guys wearing the same dress? And Meg's like, so they both did the sparkly sort of thing, and they were wearing the same dress. So isn't that an interesting practical example of that?
Yeah, it is.
Like once upon a time, back potentially in the Doris Day era, mothers and daughters would be dressed the same.
But I think I'm hearing guys doing the same thing. Like guys are talking about getting tickets for their sons to go and see Pearl Jam. So a lot of guys are getting super pumped on Pearl Jam with their sons. I don't think my dad ever would have come to a concert with me, ever. Like he wouldn't have even thought of going to even something kind of more mellow like Dire Straits. Dad just wouldn't have gone.
My mum took me to see movies when she wasn't sure about them. Like as I got to the age where
as she wasn't sure.
That's
so she
difference. We went and saw. I really liked Michael J. Fox, and I wanted to go and see Teen Wolf.
Oh yeah.
And she was just not sure it would be appropriate, and she went and she took me to the movies to see it, and it was hilarious because there's a scene. I haven't watched it for many years, but looking back, I think it was pretty tame.
Yeah.
But it was a relationship scene, and I was just dying inside. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm watching this in front of my mom. But that was really cool. Like I look back and I'm like, I'm so glad that she did that.
My dad went and saw Jurassic Park because I wanted to see. He went and saw it, so then he could take me. Make sure
so he checked it out first.
That's the difference.
Yeah.
Like now, they don't check it out first. They would go, I'll get to bond with my kid. So it's more of a bonding thing through popular culture. So I think that's a change. Yeah. So I think with the Taylor Swift thing, there's definitely
they just all want to
I don't know if all the guys and the girls are into the same things yet. Like I don't know an artist yet where the whole family would go together. I think there's some where the girls would go together and some where the boys would go together, but not necessarily I don't think. But you see it through history. Like, I think a lot of parents were stoked on the Beatles after Elvis, because Elvis was considered to be pretty raunchy. And then the Beatles rocked up with all their suits and ties, and they were like the boys next door. But then they went off the rails with their long hair and crazy drugs and all that sort of stuff. But I think initially parents were like, oh, thank goodness there's a band that my children can listen to that's safe. But yeah, something different now is parents and kids going to concerts together. I think that's different.
Yeah. I've never been to a concert with my family. I'm just thinking, they went to the Bee Gees. I remember that. But that was like an opening night at the Olympic Stadium.
Yeah, okay.
And how old were you?
I must have been in late primary school, I think.
Yeah.
So
maybe the kid one. Once you get to teens, maybe not. I don't know.
I never. Not once I started finding my own music and wanting to go to different shows. My parents never came to those.
Yeah, that's an intergenerational reality that wasn't around in the 80s and 90s and the early 2000s.
Even when I was in the city,
rock and roll was rebellious. You rebel against your parents. It wasn't something you do with them.
Because last weekend I was in the city, and that was when Taylor was performing that night, and there was people in the city. Like, we were in a food court in Pitt Street in Sydney CBD, and there was an entire family of mum, dad, two girls who all got dressed up, and we're going together.
That's in there. I'm going.
Yeah. Yep. And one of our people that come along to Soul Revival, he was had to do extra trips. Because he's an Opal card checker, he's a transport officer, and he was saying there was like quite a lot of dads wearing like specific shirts.
They reckon he thought it must have been one that was produced that said something like, "I'm a Swiftie dad."
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. Like they would almost be produced by Taylor Swift merchandising, which is
interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. So I'm just wondering, does that look like? And you know how much we love intergenerational ministry. If that's happening in culture, do you think that makes church more appealing if there is more intergenerational flavour?
I think it's redeemable. Like, I think there's, there's an example of you and your mum wanting to go and do something together. Why do we do church separately? Why don't we do it together? I think that's redeemable.
Yeah, so it's almost like often we're trying to explain why we do things the way we do because they're from a biblical foundation, and the secular world won't have that biblical foundation. But sometimes when the world approaches us, we can go, see, it makes sense. My other touch point for that is the mindfulness movement.
Oh, yeah.
People are like, stop each day and think of 3 things you're grateful for, and that would be really helpful. And I was doing chaplaincy when that was really at its height, and that was a massive big push. And I was like, why? I can see the benefit. Why does this not excite me? And then I went, because I pray, and praying is about being grateful for things. So it's not something new from a Christian point of view. But that led to the opportunity. People were saying, stopping and being thoughtful about your life and thinking about what you're grateful for is a good thing. And I'm like, and Christians have been doing it forever because God tells us to be thankful, and that's part of our prayer life. So it's not, it meant that the world suddenly were valuing something, and then you could go, and guess what? That's in Christianity too. It's valuable. So it can be a teaching point.
With the mindfulness stuff, I feel sad that people are thankful for something, but they're not thankful to the person who gave it to them.
I mean, it's definitely not.
The power of it is like if someone you love gives you something, you can be, I'm really thankful for that. But it's even more beautiful when you can say thank you. That's.
But the fact that it even.
I know. Oh yeah. No, I get what you're saying.
Even that it has value with God removed. Like, isn't it beautiful that God's given us something that's with Him? But even if you take that out, there's still I don't know, it's like God tells us to do things for a reason. It's good for you. Even if you haven't got God in your life,
it's good
thankfulness
for you to be
actually is good for the emotions and the thoughts and the whatever of a human being, because God made us like that. So He made us so that when we were thankful to Him, there would be that extra benefit, and they're getting that little bit of benefit, not the whole benefit.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know.
No, it's true.
Yeah, it's interesting. But so that Taylor thing and that intergenerational thing, being able to say to people, like, is that cool? Is that awesome that families were going to Taylor together and everybody loved it? Yes. Is it awesome that we don't want to have these segregated stage of life things in our church? Yes. People go,
it's good.
I suppose part of the, like, going to rock and roll shows or whatever kind of show yourself is that you would usually be paying for those tickets yourself. Whereas I wonder if you're all going as a family, Mum and Dad are probably paying for the tickets, and you know how expensive those tickets were for Taylor Swift. That was pretty wild. So I wonder. Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out that it maybe is a change in our culture that may be useful to know, so that we can kind of speak to it.
Also, think there's a shadow to it as well. If parents aren't parents, that's not cool. I think the kids need the parents to be separate as well. So that's why you were talking before about the power and imbalance with leaders and youth. When you go to youth group, it's not everyone mucking in together. There is a role for the youth leader. I am a little bit concerned about how we're approaching bringing up kids. We're not just mates with them. We're also trying to give them direction and boundaries. And it's interesting. One of the things I'm thinking about at the moment is one thing that seems to be more a problem for younger people than older people, and they don't share it with older people, is the amount of times kids spend. I mean, adults spend time gaming on their phones and stuff too, but they can, well, I don't know, some maybe not be able to, but they can put it down and do other stuff. Whereas kids, I'm interested how many stories I'm hearing from parents when they say, okay, screen time's up, the kids have a massive meltdown. So it's not just but I want to keep going. It's almost like you're disconnecting me from my life support system and I can't breathe without it.
Yeah, I see.
It's
the level of
really
addiction
interesting.
that's
It's so
dangerous,
interesting. Yeah. And it's reshaping our brains. So again, if you look at that and then you've got this more friendship model of parenting and the kid goes, no, and they scream, maybe you might back down and go, okay. But you're not teaching your kid to say no to stuff. You're not teaching your kid to be bored. And you're also not teaching your kid that sometimes people in authority just tell you to do stuff and it's like that's why I think organised sport's good for kids, because you're on a soccer field, referee says you're offside and you go, no, I'm not. And, well, I don't care what you think, I'm telling you you're offside. That's good for people to hear that sort of thing, because there needs to be some kind of structure to our communities and our lives together. But I think we're heading down a pretty dangerous path when there's not really any authority and there's not really any truth and there's not really any clear way of thinking. And it's interesting that anxiety and depression's going through the roof when kids don't have as many boundaries, and I wonder if that's part of it. I don't know, I'm not a psychologist, so I don't know about that. But
I'm actually glad you brought that up, because I found an article the other week, which is in the Atlantic by a writer called Derek Thompson. Yep. And we should say it's primarily focused on Americans. Yep. But it's talking about Americans are spending less time socialising and more time alone, and a trend that's been escalating since the 1970s and is linked to increased rates of anxiety, depression and overall dissatisfaction. Okay. And so there's actually a graph that they break it up into white and African American, but it basically stays the same from 1976, maybe drops down a little bit to 2008, and then afterwards it's dropping to almost another 20% in terms of
iPhone, isn't it?
Yeah, and basically it says it's the percentage of teens who say they go out with their friends 2 times a week or more. So it drops from 76 to 2008, it's hovering around 80%, and then after 2008 it steadily declines down to 60%. So it's a 20% drop off in a bit over 12 years.
And come back to that, if it's good for kids to get together, the parents need to go, hey, look, I really want to encourage that. But a lot of Gen X parents are like, I don't want to tell my kid to do something they don't want to do because I don't want to lose a relationship with them. And I got forced to do things and I didn't like it and I hated my parents for it. I don't want to be hated, so I'm just going to let them do whatever they want. So then you say to a parent, I haven't seen your kid at youth group. Oh, yeah, they don't want to go. Okay, cool. Do you reckon it might be good to encourage them to go? Oh, I don't want to force them. I want them to make their own decision. I'm like, well, they'll make a decision not to go because it's not natural. And then you talk to the kids and they're like, oh, you've got to understand our culture is we don't hang out much. I'm like, okay, well, that might be your culture, but it might be good for you to push against that a bit and actually come to stuff. So, yeah, that's an interesting conversation.
What do you think the insecurity is in being worried that you won't be able to be friends with your child, your son or daughter? What do you think, Fee? Like, why would parents be saying that? Why would parents
do that?
Why are they worried about losing that relationship?
Because there's conflict in being in authority.
I like the conflict.
I think is one part of it. You avoid the conflict if you never have those moments, and so that's another thing. Kids aren't being taught conflict resolution in a loving family situation where we're committed to one another. The only conflict they're getting is out in the world where people don't give a crap about each other. I think that's unhelpful. But I can see why. And so one of the things that I've seen jumping back into youth ministry on a Friday night, like the parents dropping the kids off, I was their youth leader. Not all of them, but a couple of them.
Yeah.
That is amazing. That's really beautiful. But also, one of the parents at one point, this is not one that I was a youth leader of, but ones at that age, their daughter shared something with me that she hadn't shared with her yet. And she beautifully was like, she was so lovely. She's like, I'm so glad that she's talked to you about that, but my heart hurts because she didn't talk to me. She did talk to her, but I was like, thank you for your vulnerability and honesty in that. Wow. But at the same time, like, that was because I was youth leader. I was not parent, and parents are fearful of being the one that, like, I think parents are fearful that if they are that authority figure, then the conversations will go elsewhere, and they're probably mostly thinking they're friends. But it was even harder for this mum because she's like, but you're old too, you know, how come she shared it with you? I'm like, because I have a different relationship with her, and it's easier for her to share that with me, you know.
And we partner with her, and that's why she ended up telling the mum, because you led that. Yeah, that's
it. Yeah, totally. And I was having a conversation with mum because this thing that she'd said, I'm like, we need to talk about it. And I'd said to her, let's talk, and we talked about it together.
Yeah,
so it was a conversation that led into the conversation with the mum, and then later on, just with the mum, the mum showed me her heart, and I'm like, she didn't have to tell me that, but it really made me go, wow, like there's so much pressure there, and I don't think that having that appropriate authority as a parent that Stu's talking about precludes that, but I think parents are fearful of that with good reason, because they may have arced up at their parents when their parents told them to do stuff. Maybe? I don't know. They're two really fearful points, I think.
No, I think that's good. I think fear drives it. I think one of the other fears is that they're going to lose their kids. And I think in previous generations, there was this sense of, I bring my kids up and then I send them out, they go and have their own life. And a lot of people who retired, I don't know if it's still a thing, but a lot of retirees would just, you know, move down to the south coast or move somewhere to retire at a retirement kind of seaside location away from their families. And I've done my job now. I'm going to live my life. My kids are all okay. I get a sense that with more kids staying at home because of cost of living pressures and stuff, people whinge about it, but I think they secretly love it because their kids are still with them. And I think the letting go for Gen X is a lot harder.
Yeah,
and
that makes sense.
I think, you know, they used to talk about the fact that we were the first generation to have divorce, and we had experienced broken families for the first time in a big way. So it's not to say there wasn't divorce before us, but the rates when we were growing up was about 50%. So they reckon that was a big indicator in why Gen Xers were looking for community and looking for relationship. And I think they're looking for the friendship and relationship with their own kids, and a bit more permanence than a lot of them experienced with their broken families when they were growing up. Now, the rates are still high, I think, but they're not as high, I don't think, as in the 80s when no-fault divorce came in. But watching parents and their kids, there's like a sense of, I don't know, I look at some of the photos online and I think, are you trying to be like them, or are you trying to get them to be like you? Is that, like, is there a bit of a mini-me thing going on, and you're continuing to try and have them be shaped to be like you? And
I think there's also the whole thing of...
I think there's a bit of that. Yeah, go on.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's all right.
Do you think there's also the whole thing of, like, that whole Peter Pan thing, people don't want to grow up. When you grow up, you're boring. So the Gen X, like, people who were grown up were boring. So they're trying to hold on to being young. And that would feed into that. Like, if I'm cool and I know all the lingo and I'm into the same things as my kids, I'm still young, I'm still cool, I'm scared of being old.
And it's different too. You look at photos of middle-aged people in the 70s and they look really old. I don't know if you've noticed that. Or even in the 80s, actually. And 90s. Like, parents look like they've gone bang into old age when they hit 40 or something. Because they're wearing suits and ties and they're doing their hair, you know, and all that sort of stuff. Whereas our generation feels free to just dress more casually, and I think there's a bit of that as well. So, I don't know. It's an interesting concept, Joel. It's I think people are. I mean, the other thing, if you look at it from big picture, the church used to be the centre of society and everyone used to go to church. No one used to leave their church. They used to stay at their church for a long time. So there was a locus of their life that was constant. Now that's not there for most people. What do they fill it with? Well, they have to somehow, I don't know, I suppose use Taylor Swift to create the same intergenerational connection that church used to do.
Yeah, that might be it. Because even going back to this article, they're like, what's the solution to this problem? Of increased screen time, busier schedules, erosion of social infrastructure. They say there isn't one size fits all answer, but the first step could be acknowledgement of the importance of face-to-face social interaction and the detrimental effects of isolation. So therefore encouraging community involvement, limiting screen time, which you spoke about, and making time for social interaction could be part of the solution. And so I wonder, last week you talked about how it's almost like a little bit of a thing sometimes where children or teenagers growing up don't want to be at the same church as their parents.
Yeah.
So they end up going to a different church. So I'm wondering, like, how do we maybe retool that to go, like, it's actually okay to grow up in the same church as your parents? Because as John was saying last week, I was like, I would love the fact if my son or sons grew up at the same church as me, and I would say the same thing about my children.
Yeah,
but how do you think we kind of encourage that?
I think you'd just be a team together with you, with whoever's in your family, and even if you're a single person and you never get married, like being with a family that's sort of in ministry together. I don't think a lot of us think ministry is something that builds intimacy, but it does actually. The more you minister together, the more intimate you become.
It really does.
There's simple things like if the kids are seeing mum and dad in ministry each week, they're not just thinking church is going to church, it's being church. And then if they actually get involved in that teamwork, they then feel like they're serving, and that's what the family does. So you're getting a lot of people not letting us involve them. They're standing back from us and not wanting to get involved because they don't want to get burnt out or whatever. But soccer clubs around the Shire where we live, you go to soccer, like if you've got 2 kids, you'll be going to 2 trainings a week at least, and you'll be going to 2 different soccer games on a Saturday at least, or maybe Sunday, and you'll probably be on ground control once a month. Now, if your kid's really good at it, you'll probably have 2 soccer trainings
So they get reps and stuff.
Yep. And then if you go, that kid's got a tutor, that's another day or 2 a week, and then you've got kids that are doing music, and so they're doing a musical interest. It's just crazy. So if we expected that of people, people would go, oh, I can't believe the church expects me to do too much. What do you think the church should expect you to do 1 hour a week when I don't have anything else on to go? Because I could go once a fortnight or once a month. And so you can just see this kind of, the kids are watching adults make those choices, and so then they make those same choices. So when you get a family, particularly where the mum and dad are in a ministry together and they're talking about it at home, what do you think we should do with this? Or what about, the kids are like, wow, this is part of our life, this is part of our DNA. So that's how we kind of, I don't know, that's just how I did it with my kids, just include them in our ministry from an early age. And my dad did with me when I was younger. It was like, his phrase to me and my brother was, Crawshaws are always the last to leave, and we'll stack the chairs. So if I see you standing around talking and not stacking chairs, then, I'll say, come on, let's do it. So I just went, yeah, okay, that's what you do as a Christian. But then I noticed a lot of other people didn't stack chairs, and I'm like, that's weird. But I think that's the kind of thing we need to be serving and be active as a Christian, I think. So
the servant-heartedness is actually a really good model for doing it all together as a family.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
And then little things like eating dinner together, even in families where there's 2 or 1, the regular meal time is really helpful. So even when people living alone, don't sit at the TV and eat dinner at the TV. Sit down at a table, have a prayer, I think that sort of thing is really good rhythm for your life. And then think about who you could invite over for dinner once a week, or could you make a meal for someone who needs it, or there's a whole heap of things we can do to serve, not just do it at church. So.
And then it has that community impact as well, which is what this article.
What do you think of your kids? I mean, you and your wife are both active in church. Particularly dads being active is actually pretty powerful, because a lot of mums get active in church, but sometimes the dad's kind of too busy jet skiing or playing golf or not having goes at that. That's great, but we go watch soccer games and stuff like that, and that's important to us. So the kids know that. But to have church or Bible study, seeing dad sitting at the table preparing his Bible study and say, "Oh, what are you doing, Dad?" "Oh, I'm just getting ready for Bible study tomorrow night. I've got some boys coming over." "Oh, sick." That's also very powerful witness. Yeah.
Yeah, we actually did that because it feeds in the community group at my place, and had the material. I said, we usually read a story before game. I said, "Hey guys, can you help me prepare this study?"
Yeah.
And my 2 older kids were just bang into it,
Yeah.
and I was like, "Oh wow, this is."
Yeah.
That's just a story to
That's
say,
good.
not like look how good I am, but it was
No.
this is really special.
So let's redeem that Taylor Swift thing and say if mums know what their daughter's like, vibe that and try and help them to enter into a relationship with Jesus, because you know what their problems are, and it's actually C.S. Lewis says that Christians who talk about Jesus together have the best friendships, and when they stop talking about Jesus together, they stop being friends as much. So I suppose if you really want to be friends with your kids, introduce them to Jesus and serve in the church together and talk about the Lord, not just Taylor Swift. That's what I reckon anyway.
Yeah. The friendship bracelet thing is fun because some of the girls brought beads to
cool.
like
Jesus beads.
no, so just general beads to
Yep.
make friendship
Oh,
bracelets.
okay. Yep.
So
A
that's
couple
a
of weeks
Taylor
before
Swift
Taylor
thing, right?
Swift. Yes, it's a Taylor Swift thing.
Yeah.
And so it was it was before term went back, so it was one of the weeks where official late night on Saturday night wasn't on, but they just brought the beads along as something to do, and they brought them back since just as like a little random thing. So we were watching a movie last week at late night, and there was some people at the back making beads at the same time, which was delightful, and they kept doing it later. But I went up, not a Taylor Swift fan. Sit down, hang out with us, Fee. There was somebody there who was making beads for someone, like just making Taylor Swift ones, and I just sat there and went, "Oh, you've got the Jesus colour," so I made myself some Jesus beads, and they didn't care. So there was this intergenerational thing where I didn't even have to be a Taylor fan, but there was an inclusiveness, that's a redeeming thing, isn't it? So Taylor can be across the generations, but even though I wasn't Taylor, there was still that moment across the generations. So that was sort of the impact of church doing that, Taylor doing that, and that all sort of mixing up in a big mix. I could have walked over and gone, "I'm not into Taylor," and walked away.
Yeah, true.
And I could have sat down and I said, "Oh, is it cool if I make a different one?" And they're like, "Yeah, that's fine." Because I wasn't sure what the vibe was, didn't want to be disrespectful if they were just doing the Taylor stuff. I mean, the girls had bought the beads and brought the beads. So, yeah, there was all those sorts of dynamics all mixing around.
And good evangelism ideas, like the girls could put some Jesus beads on their Taylor Swift thing, and their friends go, "Oh, what's that?" And they could tell them the gospel. So that's pretty cool.
Good.
Yeah, possibly.
Well, why don't we leave it there
Yeah.
for the episode?
Good.
Thank you very much, Stu. It's been fun. Thank you, Fee, for coming on. It's been
Having
good talking about that stuff. I think we've got a lot of things I've got myself a lot of things to think about how we can continue to, be intergenerational, not be too much of a Swiftie, be more of a, I was trying to think of a Jesus Christ. No, that doesn't even work, is it? Just be more like
Christy.
Jesus. Yeah.
A Christy.
A Christy.
And a Swiftie.
At school I got called a churchy. So maybe
Churchy.
Churchy.
There you go, churchy.
Churchy's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is funny.
But it's been a great conversation, and as we always say at the end of every episode, if you want to get involved in the conversation, please email me at joel@shockabsorber.com.au. But yeah, again, fantastic. Thank you for everyone listening and watching, and fantastic to have you along. And you went one way a bit too early, but we can do it now. You ready?
Wait for it.
One way.
Thanks, Joel.